In the last week of June 1940, a dock worker in Greenock, Scotland, loaded a wooden crate onto a warship. The crate was heavy, far heavier than it looked, and it was stencilled with a single word: fish. There were hundreds more crates like it on the quay that night, and there would be thousands more in the weeks that followed. Every one of them was a lie, because inside those crates was not fish. Inside those crates was Britain. Not the island. The idea that kept the island alive. Gold bars from the deepest vaults of the Bank of England. Share certificates, bonds, securities, the paper claims on 2 centuries of accumulated wealth. Nearly everything the country owned that could be carried, packed into fish crates and ammunition boxes, and sent down to the docks under armed guard. By the end of that summer, the largest movement of physical wealth in recorded history had crossed the most dangerous ocean on Earth, in secret, without insurance, without a single crate going missing, and without a single word of it reaching the enemy. Thousands of people took part: dockers, sailors, bankers, train crews, cleaning staff. Not one of them talked. This is the story of Operation Fish, how it worked, why a country would gamble everything it had ever earned on one crossing, and what the manifest of those crates tells you about a question Britain has never quite stopped asking. When the worst comes, what do you save first? To understand why the gold had to move, you have to stand where Britain stood in June 1940. France had just fallen. It had taken 6 weeks. The British Army had escaped at Dunkirk, but it had left its equipment on the beaches. Invasion was not a fear, it was a schedule. The government was told to expect German landings within weeks, and no serious planner could promise they would fail. And that created a problem that had nothing to do with soldiers. Britain was fighting a war it could not pay for from its own factories alone. Aircraft, rifles, ships, food, fuel. Much of it had to come from America, and America, at that point in the war, did not take promises. American law required cash on the barrel, gold or dollars or securities that could be sold for dollars. No cash, no weapons. So follow the logic to its uncomfortable end. If the German army landed in Kent, the war would not necessarily be over. The government had plans to continue fighting from Canada, with the Royal Navy, the Empire, and whatever could be saved. But that version of the war could only be fought if Britain's money escaped before Britain fell. A government in exile with an empty treasury is not a government, it is a committee. The gold was not being evacuated to keep it safe. It was being evacuated to keep the war possible. Now consider what the decision actually required. The Bank of England's gold and hundreds of millions of pounds in private securities seized from private citizens under emergency wartime powers, all of it loaded onto ships and sent through waters where German submarines were sinking Allied vessels every single day. In the month the shipments began, U-boats were destroying dozens of ships in the Atlantic every week. And here is the detail that tells you how desperate the calculation was. None of it could be insured. Lloyd's of London could not write a policy on the national reserves, because no one could underwrite the loss of a nation's entire wealth, and because asking for a quote would have revealed the plan. So the cabinet did the arithmetic of last resort. If a ship went down, the gold on it was simply gone. They decided the risk of moving everything was smaller than the risk of keeping it at home. Winston Churchill's government, weeks into his premiership, signed off on sending the country's savings to sea without cover, in secret, into a submarine war. The first major run set the pattern. On the 24th of June 1940, the cruiser HMS Emerald left the Clyde for Halifax, Nova Scotia. On board, alongside her crew, were boxes of gold and cases of securities worth, by the standards of the day, a small national budget. With her went a Bank of England official named Alexander Craig, a man whose name appears in almost no history book, travelling as the personal escort of a meaningful share of everything his country owned. The Atlantic did not cooperate. The Emerald ran into heavy weather, seas rough enough that her escorting destroyers struggled to hold station, and she made much of the crossing fast and alone because speed was the only protection anyone could actually give her. She reached Halifax on the 1st of July. The crates went straight from the dockside onto a waiting train, and the train went west under guard. A week later came the gamble that still reads like fiction. A convoy of 5 ships, Among them the battleship HMS Revenge and converted liners carrying together a cargo of gold and securities so large that historians describe it as the most valuable convoy ever to sail. Hundreds of millions of pounds at 1940s values, billions upon billions in today's money, spread across 5 hulls so that no single torpedo could end the country's finances in one explosion. That was the actual reasoning. Spread the wealth across enough ships that Britain could survive losing one. They lost none. While the ships were crossing, Canada was quietly building the other half of the operation. The gold went to Ottawa, into the vaults of the Bank of Canada, where staff worked in shifts to receive a flood of bullion that no vault in the world had been designed to expect. The securities went somewhere stranger. In Montreal, the Sun Life Assurance Building, one of the largest buildings in the British Empire, gave up 3 floors of its basement. A new vault was built inside it, and into that vault went the paper wealth of Britain, guarded by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, around the clock. The organisation that ran it was given a deliberately boring name, the United Kingdom Security Deposit. Behind that name, several hundred Canadian bank clerks, brought in under oath of secrecy, spent months cataloguing millions of individual certificates. Every share, every bond, counted, recorded, filed. The paperwork of a nation, rebuilt in a basement in Montreal. And it stayed secret. That may be the most remarkable line in the whole story. The crossings involved thousands of people. Dock crews who felt how heavy the fish crates were. Sailors who watched boxes come aboard under marine guard. Railwaymen who moved sealed wagons across half of Canada. Clerks who spent their days holding another country's fortune in their hands. German intelligence never found out. Not one shipment was attacked because of a leak. Not one crate in the entire operation was lost to the enemy. The sea itself was less forgiving elsewhere. That same June, on the other side of the world, a liner called the Niagara, carrying gold for separate British purchases, struck a German mine off New Zealand and went down with her bullion aboard. Divers eventually recovered nearly all of it in one of the deepest salvage operations ever attempted. But the Niagara was the warning of what the Atlantic run was risking every single week. Ships carrying gold could and did sink. Operation Fish simply never lost the bet. Mark down what the operation achieved on its own terms. The war effort got its bank account. Through the darkest period of the war, Britain could keep paying American suppliers because its gold and its saleable securities were sitting safely on the western side of the Atlantic. Out of reach of any invasion, if the landings had come, the plan was ready. The king, the government, the fleet, and the money, fighting on from Ottawa and Montreal. The invasion never came. The escape route was never used, but the money that had escaped was spent all the same. And that is the part of the story the celebration usually skips. Follow the crates one step further. The gold that sailed west did not sail back. It went, shipment by shipment, into American accounts, paying for aircraft and rifles and food, until by early 1941, Britain was very close to simply running out. The Chancellor of the day told Parliament, in language rarely used by chancellors, that the cupboard was almost bare. The securities in the Montreal basement, the accumulated overseas investments of generations of British savers, were sold off through the war to raise dollars, and what was not sold was pledged. When the fighting ended in 1945, the country that had started the century as the world's great creditor finished the war as one of history's great debtors, borrowing from America and Canada on terms that took until the 21st century to pay off. None of that was a scandal. It was the price of survival, and almost no one in Britain then or since would say it was the wrong price. But it changes what those fish crates were. They were not just an evacuation, they were a liquidation. The wealth of the workshop of the world, packed up in 6 weeks, shipped out in secret and spent. The Empire's savings account was closed in a basement in Montreal. One certificate at a time, and the men counting it were sworn never to speak of it. So stand on that quay in Greenock for a moment, in the summer of 1940, and watch the crates go up the gangway. A country had asked itself the oldest question of all. When the worst comes, what do you save first? And it had answered honestly. Not the paintings, not the buildings, not even, in the end, the gold itself, because the gold was always going to be spent. What Britain put in those crates and pushed out into a hostile ocean was the ability to keep choosing its own future. That is what the money was for. That is what made the risk worth taking. The crates marked fish came back empty-handed, and the country they saved was never as rich again. Both of those things are true at once, and the second one was the price of the first. If someone in your family worked the docks, crewed the convoys, or kept a secret like this one for 50 years, put it in the comments. Those records matter more than the official ones. And if you want to know what happened when the bill for all of it finally arrived, this channel has already told that story. The story of a letter written in 1981 that was never meant to be read. The paper trail runs in both directions. That story is on this channel now.